We are super pleased to be able to present our Latino Infant Initiative policy agenda to you today. So I'm Bob Stechik. I'm the Director of Early Childhood Education Initiatives at UnidosUS, and I'm joined by my colleague, Tanya.
Hello, everybody. My name is Tanya Villarroel. I'm a Senior Policy Analyst, Early Childhood Education at UnidosUS.
So Tanya and I will be introducing the policy agenda, and then we'll turn the webinar over to our amazing colleagues and our all-star panel to go more in depth on the content. So over the last year, the partnership of UnidosUS and Abriendo Puertas, Opening Doors, have been implementing the Latino Infant Initiative. And one of our major efforts has been to develop and now to disseminate our national Latino infant policy agenda. So why did we do that? Well, the answer to that question is found in a more basic question, which goes to the nature of Latino infants. So the most fundamental question is, Latino infants are, and there are actually many good ways to answer this question. So Latino infants are, they're cute. They're adorable. Look at those cheeks. Look at those eyes. Look at that outfit. So in addition to being cute, Latino infants are, they're raised by families that value education highly. So over the last 2 years, UnidosUS and Abriendo Puertas have conducted numerous parent focus groups and a national Latino family survey last fall that reached 1,300 participants. In a variety of ways, families have demonstrated that they place a strong value on education, beginning with the earliest years. Latino infants are also change agents. So in this picture, my friend Ileana is sitting on top of her father's shoulder. She isn't able to walk yet, but she is a change agent. She and many other Latino infants like her are change agents. So based on the demographic data that we have been seeing for decades, and based on projections of demographic trends to come, we identify Latino infants as a demographic imperative. So the demographic data is simply striking. In the most recent census in the year 2020, the US Census Bureau counted more than 62 million Hispanics in the United States. Now, in 1970, they only counted less than 10 million people of Hispanic heritage. So we've seen a gigantic increase over the decades in what's obviously a national trend. But the story goes further because we're only in the middle of the chapter. So the US Census Bureau estimates that by 2060, the Latino population in the United States will exceed 110 million people. So that's a level of increase that's simply monumental. It's staggering, and it has huge implications for our country, both now and in the future. One way to process this information is to think about the proportion of Latino children who are enrolled in our nation's public schools. So a few decades ago, Latino children were 1 in every 7 public school students nationwide. Now that number is 1 in 4. And in the coming decade, that number will go to 1 in 3. So how do we think about Latino infants? They are America's future workforce. The challenge is that their opportunities for educational achievement are undermined by a variety of factors, hence the importance of a national Latino infant policy agenda. So I mentioned earlier the National Latino Family Survey that we conducted last fall. One of the questions to Latino families with young children was, what's most important to you about your child's development? Now, there are many, many replies. So Latino families recognize, for example, that there are a number of important variables in children's development. So good nutrition, social emotional development, physical development, many, many things are important. The number one reply, the highest vote getter, was reading comprehension. In our survey data, as well as in our parent focus groups, parents have a strong understanding that reading is central to school achievement and to success later in life. Unfortunately, the data on achievement don't match that level of intent. So the National Assessment of Educational Progress is our nation's report card on how children are doing from K to 12. The unfortunate reality is that for all Latino children nationwide, the number of children who read at a proficient level is only 1 in 5. Only 1 in 5. So this is not the way to prepare America's future workforce. Unfortunately, there are many factors that undermine children's achievement, and our policy agenda goes into a great amount of detail. One of those factors is misinformation regarding dual language development. In our focus groups, we found that Latino families were being told by their children's speech therapist not to speak Spanish to their children. The reason being that the therapist's advice to Latino families was not to speak Spanish to their children because it would confuse them. Unfortunately, as we've disseminated this finding around the nation, we find this to be a common experience of Latino families. So many Latino families report hearing this information in a variety of contexts, and families who are receiving speech therapy are often hearing the same thing. Unfortunately, this undermines children's development, learning, and school achievement because it cuts parents off from using the language they're most comfortable with. It cuts children off from their parents and extended family members. It cuts children off from their culture and from prior learning that they've done in their home language. So misinformation is one of many factors that undermines children's achievement. And our policy agenda details the multiple ways that children's educational success is undermined. So failing to recognize and respect families' home languages and cultures is just one of many examples. There's a significant issue with resources available to early childhood and other programs, insufficient resources for bilingual services programs, and especially for workforce development. And our panel coming will touch on all of those. Unfortunately, program standards often don't take cultural and linguistic responsiveness into account or provide sufficient resources for staff working with children and families. In addition, there are a variety of other factors that undermine Latino infants' healthy development and early learning, such as issues with housing, access to adequate health care, and many other factors. So, a national Latino infant policy agenda is very necessary and long overdue. And it is our sincere pleasure now to introduce that agenda.
Thank you so much. Hello, everyone. I'm excited to share our policy agenda with you. And before we begin, it's worth noting that while there are policies that benefit infants and toddlers nationwide, we're particularly dedicated to those that will have a significant impact on the lives of Latino families. That's the value of this Latino Infant Policy Agenda. It's focused on the Latino community. Before we dive into the goals and recommendations, let me share how this publication came to be. So, as Bob mentioned, the Latino Infant Initiative is a partnership between UnidosUS and Abriendo Puertas, opening doors. And before even deciding on drafting a policy agenda, the first thing that we did was to gather a group of 16 experts. These individuals, including researchers, providers, program leaders, parents, were crucial in our work. Their input was so valuable, and we met throughout 2023 and discussed with them all of these recommendations and worked with them to draft this policy agenda. Since we also wanted to ensure that our agenda was rooted in the experiences of Latino community, we also conducted a national Latino family survey led by Abriendo Puertas with 1,300 respondents from Latino parents with children 5 years old. And also UnidosUS conducted 5 focus groups with Latino parents. So we have our own data that help us draft this policy agenda. And lastly, we look for feedback from other organizations, other UnidosUS teams. All of this process allowed us to have to refine our recommendations and to have a policy agenda that is rooted in the research and also has input from different points of views. We have 4 principles that inform our policy agenda. The first one is that it's intersectional. Why? Because one of the advisory council members said that advocates have the privilege of thinking of the issues in silos, but families don't have that luxury. So we recognize that families face multiple interconnected challenges. And that's why our policy agenda evolved from being education focused to being comprehensive and addressing different issues, not only education, but also health, economic security, and immigration. Our policy agenda is also evidence focused, and you can find all the citations in the policy agenda because we know that this is super important, that all our recommendations are rooted in research evidence. Also, being child-centered and family-focused, we prioritize both children and their families, and of course, being equitable. It's central to our agenda, the commitment of advancing equity, ensuring that every child and family, regardless of their circumstances, has equal opportunities. So we discussed how the process, we discussed the principles, and this is our overarching goal. Next slide, please. Our overarching goal is that the Latino Infant Initiative Policy Agenda is to influence federal and state policies that will ensure that all Latino infants, toddlers, and their families, regardless of background or circumstances, have equitable access to high quality, culturally and linguistically responsive programs and services. Next slide, please. And so we've defined 8 essential goals to define this overarching goal that cover education, health, economic security, and immigration issues. To save time, I'll focus on the recommendations that matter most to Latino families, since I am going to go through all of the 8 goals and try to dive into all of them a little bit. Next slide, thank you. So our first goal is access to high quality programs. And of course, achieving this requires funding. We need increased funding for various purposes, but one that significantly impacts Latinos is the lack of dual language programs. High quality programs are programs that are culturally and linguistically responsive. This is super important. We've heard from Latino parents that they want their children to be bilingual, both for better job opportunities and to maintain their cultural identity. However, Data from the 2023 National Latino Family Report reveals a gap. While 65% of Latino parents express interest in enrolling their children in bilingual programs, only 52% have done so or plan to. So we do need more funding, and we especially need more funding for dual language programs. We also recommend simplifying the application process and easing documentation requirements. These requirements disproportionately affect Latino families. A study found that Latino children represented 35% of those eligible for Childcare Development Fund, but only 20% of those served. That means that there are language barriers, and also the demand for documents like social security numbers hinder eligible Latino families from navigating the application process. So to access high quality programs, we need more funding, especially for dual language programs, and we also need to simplify the application process. Our second goal is having a diverse and qualified ECE workforce. We know that Latino children benefit when they have teachers and caregivers who can speak their language and understand their experiences. But there's a challenge. We don't have enough ECE teachers who can speak multiple languages. How do we fix this? Well, we need to encourage the hiring of more bilingual teachers, but we also need to create pathways for friends, families, and neighbors to acquire licensing, to license, and to be part of this workforce. And to make all of this happen, of course, we need to enhance compensation. A vital step, since this also would be a positive impact on Latinas. I don't know if you know, but nationally, 1 in 5 ECE teachers are Latinas. So increasing compensation for ECE teachers will also impact Latinas. But of course, it's not only about pay. We also need to make sure ECE professionals have good working conditions. Additionally, it's essential to empower the ECE workforce with the skills to effectively work with dual language learners and provide culturally and linguistically responsive services. We need more professional development in this area. This training is critical, especially since 1 in 5 early childhood teachers and caregivers work in settings with high Hispanic enrollment of 25% or more. Our third goal revolves around family engagement programs and maintaining the home language. We know that there's a lot of misinformation out there, especially regarding bilingualism. Many families hear advice telling them to stop speaking their home language to their children, even though research says it's beneficial. Family engagement programs play a crucial role in addressing this misinformation and empowering parents to maintain their home language. But to achieve this, we need to increase the dissemination of accurate information, to confront this misinformation about dual language development, and allocate more funding for research-based home visiting programs. We also need more research that specifically focuses on Latino infants. These steps will help ensure that families receive the right guidance and support to promote their children's language development effectively. Our fourth goal focuses on ensuring access to healthcare. Now, let's look at a crucial statistic. Who knows what's the percentage of Latinos that are uninsured? Can you share it in the chat? Let me give you a hint. 5% of non-Hispanic whites are uninsured. What's the percentage of Latinos that are uninsured? Well, shockingly, it's 20%. That's right. 20% of Latinos are uninsured. And this underscores the urgency of improving healthcare access for Latino population. To achieve this, we must transform the options offered by the federal government to states into guarantees. Healthcare access varies widely from state to state. For instance, there's a 5-year waiting period for lawful immigrants to access Medicaid. Although states can waive this waiting period, only 35 states have done so. We need all states to waive this waiting period, among other different opportunities. We also need states to provide state dollars to provide coverage to undocumented individuals who are ineligible for federal funding. And additionally, we need to prioritize greater access to culturally and linguistically responsive mental health services, especially considering that Latinas are 40% more likely to experience postpartum depression than non-Hispanic women. Our fifth goal, and I'm going to be go a little bit faster here, is healthy and affordable food. We know that nutrition is so important. Actually, did you know that in 2021, 1 in 5 Latino households faced food insecurity? Latino infants deserve access to healthy and affordable food. This includes extending benefits to Puerto Rico, ensuring equitable access across all regions, and of course, reauthorizing the Farm Bill and passing the Child Nutrition Reauthorization Bill. Next slide, please. Our sixth goal is address gun violence. Gun violence emerged as a top concern for parents in 2023 National Latino Family Survey. Shockingly, 1 in 5 Latino parents, 1 in 5, reported that either they or their children had already experienced gun violence. To address this pressing issue, we propose a comprehensive set of gun safety laws, including holding gun manufacturers liable, implementing a ban on assault weapons, and other laws. Next slide, please. Our seventh goal focuses on economic well-being. Latino children experience poverty at higher rates than non-Latino children, with 27% of them living in poverty, compared to 9% of white children. We know there are very important policies that will help addressing this issue. First one is paid family and medical leave. The second one is support equal pay for Latinas, and also expanding child tax credit. We know that child tax credit is a vital tool that have lifted millions of people, including children, out of poverty. But these tools are unavailable for children of families that do not have a social security number, even when the children themselves or one of the parents are a U.S. citizen. This is a policy that we really need to move forward. And finally, providing a pathway to home ownership to build international wealth. Our eighth goal, and the last one, it's dignity for immigrant families. We heard from our advisory council that immigration affects every aspect of their lives. So focusing on immigration policies is super, super important. And for that, we need to provide a pathway to citizenship and ensure that judges consider potential hardship to minor children in all removal decisions, and also ensure regular training for ICE personnel who may come into contact with children. Next slide. So those were our goals, and I'm going to be sharing with you the policy agenda where you can find all the citations and more information about these goals. And we're excited that now, after drafting all our goals, we are going to be implementing all these goals. And to do that, we need to be crafting an advocacy strategy. This involves seeking opportunities, building partnerships, prioritizing the most impactful measures to achieve our objectives. Once we have identified the best path forward, we'll employ effective tactics to continue our work. So we have our goals. Now we're going to look into how we're going to implement these goals. Next slide, please. Because we believe that policy happens when preparation meets opportunity, and we are definitely prepared. And we will keep working to find those opportunities to drive meaningful change for the Latino community. Thank you so much, and now I will pass it to Javier.
Thank you, Tanya, and thank you, Bob. It is an honor and a pleasure to be collaborating with all of you in this important work. And Andrea, if we can go to the next slide, please. Thank you. As Bob mentioned at the beginning, we have a all-star panel of experts who are going to share their thoughts and their insights with us with regard to the Latino Infant Initiative Policy Agenda. And before we go to the panel, I do want to highlight the work of these three organizations that have partnered to bring this work together in full circle. And that is, of course, UnidosUS, the largest Latino civil rights organization in the country, an organization that's been around for a long, long time, as well as Avance, which was founded in Texas, but now has a footprint across the country, helping families find their own voice and their power. And then Abriendo Puertas, an organization built for and by Latino families based out of California, also with a national footprint that has really, I think, really built some strong foundational work for these types of policy initiatives to take place. I'm not going to introduce each of our panelists because they're going to do that themselves, but I do want to tell you how glad I am to be a part of their team. Dr. Teresa Granillo, Ms. Melanie Monroe, and Ms. Adrian Pedrosa, three experts who come from different angles to this work, but angles that are completely and absolutely rooted in community and in the future of Latino families. So with that, I'd like to start with Adrian Pedrosa, and the question for you and for the other two panelists is to give your name and the organization and the role that you are here presenting today, as well as to give us your earliest memory of an asset or strength that has been passed down from your family or community that you still carry to this day. We'll start with Adrian.
Well, buenas tardes. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Adrian Pedrosa. I'm the Executive Director of Abriendo Puertas, Opening Doors. Have the honor to see many great friends and partners on this Zoom. I see your names. It's an honor to work with this just great group of leaders. I am, first off, a father of three wonderful, beautiful, intelligent, talented children. When I started in this work of community building in early childhood development and education, I was not a father. And so being in this collective movement over many years and now being a father brings this work just to so much life and relevancy to me and my partner as we continue to raise our children here in New Mexico. So I work for Abriendo Puertas and have the privilege of living here in New Mexico in this work. My earliest memory, I think that sticks out to me is I remember as a small child. It's probably my the first memories I have of walking over to my grandparents' house and to my cousin's house, and meeting neighbors and sort of feeling this strong sense of community, of family, feeling like I was being taken care of, right, in so many different ways, that I was loved, that I was nurtured. And I remember my parents, when I started talking, my parents used to asked me to introduce myself, but they asked me to introduce myself a certain way, right, to our neighbors as I met them, and this kind of sticks with me, has stuck with me throughout my life. Adriana Alberto Pedrosa para servirle, right? So they wanted me to introduce my full name, and para servirle, right, in service, right, to you, and for me, I think that I reflect back on why in service, right, or why para servirle. And I think, as I reflect back, it's really about letting the folks know around you, right, that we are connected, that we're interconnected, and that we are in service, right, in a relationship with each other. And I just, it's something that I think in this work that I do and have done over the years, that for for me, this work is personal, right? It's about connection to each other. It's about interdependence, and it's about ensuring that that when we say we're in service to each other, that we have each other's back, right? That we're moving forward a collective well-being agenda. In this case, on behalf and with Latino children and families.
Thank you, Adrian, for that. Melanie, let's go to you, and it's the same question. Tell us your name, the organization, and the role that you are representing today, and give us your earliest memory of an asset or strength that's been passed down from your family or community.
Okay. Hello, everybody. My name is Melanie Monroe, and I'm from San Antonio, Texas. And I'm very happy to be here. I've been working with Avante for the last 11 years. And I have 3 kids, 9 and 11-year-old boys, and a 3-year-old daughter. So I have a lot of experience with Avante for a long range of time. But I will say that the most important value that my family instilled in me, or my parents, was probably the importance and the value of a quality education. So just by sharing stories of how their education was for them growing up, I was able to understand that there's differences depending on, the side of town that you live on or the district that you go to. And that always stayed with me growing up. And so my mother shared a story about moving from one side of town to another. And of course, the school districts changed. And she just shared with me how she had, the best school lunches and the best teachers, and she loved going to school. And then when the family moved to another neighborhood, the school didn't have a cafeteria. The teachers weren't really trying to teach them anything. And it was just a big difference. And I kept that with me growing up. And my father as well went to high school. And the story that he would share with me was about all his friends in high school that were being drafted and going off to Vietnam. And so they didn't have counselors or anybody trying to prepare them for college. Everybody was, going straight to Vietnam. And so those were things that stayed with me. And the schools, unfortunately, in the area that we lived were not great schools. And my mother struggled, and she worked really hard so that she could send us to the Catholic schools in the neighborhood. And I guess I never really understood or appreciated that until I got older. But it was really a big sacrifice that she made for me. And it was important to her to make sure that me and all of my sisters got that good education. And I just thank her for instilling that in me and for working hard and teaching me and my sisters to teach our children to also value the quality of good education.
Thank you, Melanie. Dr. Granillo, same question for you.
The 2 stories that we've heard already from my amazing panelists, Melanie and Adrian, speak to me as well. But if I'm really honest about my very first memories, and kind of what value that instilled in me was really going to family events. And you all know these, us Latinos, we have these big pachangas. You've got all of your cousins and your tias and your tios there. And, as a little one in my family, and I'm sure many of you can relate, when it was time to leave, you had to go and say goodbye to every single person and give them a kiss and give them a hug and pay your respect, and especially your elders. And I remember as a little one just dreading goodbye. I would try to go hide under a table, while the whole process, it takes an hour to happen. But my mom, would pull me and be like, no, you need to go and you need to say goodbye to everybody. And really that respect, that family value and the respect that you have for each and every individual and what they bring to the family. And I just, carry that with me today in terms of the importance of family, but also the importance of relation and respect, and making sure that, you stay close to one another. You always greet one another. You ask how one another is doing. And so that value has just stuck with me very, very succinctly over the years.
Thank you for that. That's a very good grounding exercise, I think, to really remember why there is a Latino Infant Policy Agenda that's been developed over the last several months with all of your support. At the end of the day, it comes back down to that child, right? And so thank you for opening up and sharing those experiences. Melanie, let me go to you. Can you tell us a little bit more about your experience as a mother with the early childhood system in your community? And tell us what were your needs and what worked well for you and your kids in their early ages.
Okay, I became involved with Avanza, like I said, when I had my two boys. They're 9 and 11. And so they were both pretty close in age. And so even though, you know, I had a degree, I really couldn't afford to send two kids to daycare. I would have just been working to pay the daycare basically. And so Avanza had a program where they started with a home educator going to your house and visiting and just showing you different strategies and things to do with my kids, because I was primarily at home with them. And so I started off doing the home-based classes, and those turned into in-person classes where we would meet with other parents and work on different activities, parenting classes, toy making classes, social events, and the kids would be, you know, socializing with their peers at the same time. So that was one thing that I really liked. It was something where we could go and all work on ourselves. And I actually have some of the toys that we made in the class here. But looking back at it, it was something that I really needed at the time. They gave me support. You know, I found myself in a situation where I didn't have a lot of family support. I was struggling financially, and I had these two kids that were depending on me. So I was really inspired by the teacher that I had, and really grateful to the program. And, you know, if we fast forward years later down the road with my 3-year-old, I had her right at the time of COVID. So she was born in December of 2019, and COVID hit in March of 2020. And so everything shut down. I took my kids out of school. We were homeschooling, and it was a really difficult time. And luckily, Avanza came back into my life. We were at a resource fair, and they had people there that they were recruiting because they were starting to do online parenting classes. And so everybody was doing everything on Zoom, and we started again with the home-based classes online. And it was something that me and my kids all looked forward to. And, you know, I stayed with them, and eventually they started doing in-person classes, the same thing where we would go and meet and work on different activities while the kids were being watched. And I really see that it really helped my boys, because by the time they started first grade, they had already gone through Avanza for a whole year. And so they were already ready for school. And the same thing with my daughter now. She's at pre-K 4SA, which is a citywide pre-K 4 program that we all have. But even when she started that, she was already prepared just from being enrolled with Avanza since she was 2 to 3 years old. So the biggest thing they helped me with was daycare. And, you know, even if you had money around COVID time, you couldn't find a daycare anywhere. So it was really a blessing to have them in my life. And I've been able to become part of this organization, and I was able to take my kids with me to Chicago for the conference, and I'm just very grateful. I'm happy to be working on this. It's something that makes me very proud that I was a part of, you know, making this initiative. So I'm happy to be here and share my story, and I look forward to doing more with this initiative.
Well, I think, Melanie, that speaks to the power of this policy agenda, that it is driven by voices like yours, both through the focus groups conducted by Unidos, the national survey that Abriendo Puertas did, and people like you who are actually serving on the advisory of this initiative. So thank you for sharing that. Another thing comes to mind too. Imagine if every child in this country had access to the same supports and services that you receive through Avanza. Imagine that being the norm for every child in this country, not just Latino children, but every child. We would be in a much better place. So the good news is we know what works, and we know how to do it because you all are doing it in your community. Let me stay with Avanza and go to Dr. Granillo. Dr. Granillo, how do you see prenatal 3 services and systems respond to the needs of Latino children in the communities in which Avanza works?
So first, I just have to say, every time I see and hear Melanie speak, I'm even more proud of the work that we do as the parents, and how, yes, Avance is here, but I love how Melanie said we're here as a support, because the real work is being done by the parents who are working with their children at home, and they're reaching out to get support from the early childhood ecosystem. So Melanie, thank you for your commitment to your children and to their education, and to yourself, and all the work that you've done. I failed to introduce myself last time. I apologize for that. I am the CEO at Avance, also located in San Antonio. Just really briefly, what we're seeing in Texas in particular around the PN3 services and systems responding to Latino children and communities. What I've seen more recently is a lot more engagement of parent voice. So a lot more of the entities that work in Texas are taking on this concept of having parent advisories, making sure that parents are part of the decision making for programming, for policy, and just when entities are trying to identify what are the needs of the community, we are seeing more initiative of saying, well, let's just talk to the parents themselves and let them tell us. And so that's been really encouraging to see. And then, despite living in a state where we're not really allowed to talk about diversity, equity, and inclusion anymore, there is a bigger focus on racial equity, and more reflection. I can't say there's a lot of action yet, but there's more reflection on the importance of proximate leadership, the importance of people like Melanie taking leadership positions and carrying the community voice, who lived in that community, who represent the community. And that, we recently at Avance, we've taken on a project to create a BIPOC Alana-led and focused coalition in the state that focuses on PN3 initiatives. And we've received external funding from Pritzker to do that. And so there's some momentum there, even though we're in a state that is quite limiting in our ability to really focus on this type of work. And the final thing I'll say is just, we did have, as many times as we push for policy and changes, and we want to see big change. Our 88th legislation, we didn't see a whole lot, but we did get one really big win for women, for women who are just coming out of having their babies. We got expansion of Medicaid coverage for women for 12 months postpartum. That's a huge, huge win for us. So, we'll take it. We're very excited about that. As someone who is 3 days away from giving birth, this type of coverage, it is, it's so critical and it's so necessary. And so we're seeing some positive movement in the PN3 space in Texas.
That's great. Thank you. Thank you for that. Let me go to Adrian. Adrian, New Mexico has been doing some interesting work over the last few years. Can you give us some insight as to the broad-based coalition work that has led to pretty big changes in prenatal to 3 policy here in New Mexico?
Yeah, well, first off, Dr. Granillo, congratulations to you and your family. So exciting. So as I mentioned earlier, I work for Abriendo Puertas. We do national work. I've worked here in New Mexico over the last 2 decades, doing community building work, early childhood work. And previous to my current role, I worked for an organization, Partnership for Community Action. Shout out to those with that organization that are on the webinar. And our work was around really similar to Avance's mission of really seeing and investing in parents as leaders, right? We didn't run early childhood centers or childcare centers, but our work was in connecting, right, with the providers, with the groups that were serving the children of families. And we were really looking at centering our work, our advocacy work around the needs, the hopes, and the dreams of families. We were doing work around K through 12, and in 2010 really decided to focus our work upstream around making sure that our children had every opportunity, that our families had every opportunity for their kids to be lifelong learners and to be ready for preschool and kindergarten. As we started doing this work, we connected with many advocacy organizations like New Mexico Voices, like CHI, St. Joseph's, Olay, incredible groups that were thinking about how can we look at bold, sustainable investments in early childhood development and education, prenatal to 5 years old. The state of New Mexico at this time was making significant cuts in many areas of services of our safety net, and early childhood was always at risk of facing and was always facing these ongoing cuts as we were trying to fund it with very limited budgetary resources at that time. And so the idea came up that we have this incredible fund. At that point, this land grant permanent fund was worth about $10 billion, right? And it's an endowed fund that the state of New Mexico had that was granted to us by the federal government when we first became a state. And we were at that point taking 5.5% of that fund and investing it in K through 12 education. So the idea was, what if we increase that percentage and invested in earlier, right, in a family's, in a community's education, including early childhood, right, as part of the investment. And so this started this incredible collective movement of organizations like the Partnership for Community Action, like Olay, who were working on the ground every day with families, working together with advocates, with policymakers, with a multiracial coalition, a multi-sector coalition that included business owners, providers, who then engaged in a 10-year initiative to put a question to the voters that would allow us to tap into this land grant permanent fund and invest it in early childhood. I have to say that so last year, the voters of New Mexico at 70% approved this ballot initiative, which will now generate over $150 million a year that will go and will be a sustainable source of budget dollars to early childhood development and education, starting at prenatal to 5 years old. And this was 10 years of work, and it shouldn't have taken 10 years. I say 10 years because that's what it took, but it should not have taken 10 years. But there was continuous standstill at the legislature. There was continuous blockage by at that time certain policymakers who did not believe that the fund belonged to the children and the families of New Mexico, who did not believe that the voters should be able to vote and make a decision to invest the money as they saw fit and as they wanted to see. So this incredible coalition over the 10 years produced many reports like what we're talking about today, policy reports, provided research, evidence, really a full out initiative to ensure that our policymakers had the information, were educated about the benefits of early childhood development and education, but who also understood that the gap and the need was large, right? The budget need was large, and that the only way to solve and to make long-standing sustainable impact, generational impact with families and children and with communities was to make a bold investment. And so this work over the 10 years was really about, again, ensuring that legislators, policymakers had all the information, but this was done by families and children. And when Bob says that infants are change makers, we saw it. You know, it's a real thing. We saw it here in New Mexico because on any given legislative 30-day and 60-day session, we had buses and buses of families, right, and cars being driven and childcare providers going up to the legislature with families with young children, and they'd hold sit-ins in the halls of the legislature in the roundhouse, as we call it here in New Mexico, and sing, you know, nursery songs with their kids, and we made sure, right, as a collective, that this movement, that children and families, that their voice, right, that their stories, that their faces were present on an ongoing basis, and it was a relentless effort, right, that also a lot of funders really helped to make sure that groups had the funding to be able to sustain these efforts over the years. But it was relentless, and I have to say that you know, certain groups like CHI St. Joseph's, who also put a lot of resources over the years and who really led the effort, their leader in particular, Alan Sanchez, made sure that year after year that we held on to hope, that we had a chance that year that this was going to be put on the ballot. And it takes that type of I think, you know, very coordinated, very organized, and relentless effort, you know, with families and community and with organizations to see this kind of bold investment. This was the current constitutional amendment, right, the 10-year, and I have to say that, you know, just to give recognition that New Mexico has a long history of also of an early childhood movement, starting with the Children's Cabinet being formed in 2003 under now the late Governor Richardson, to the Early Childhood Education and Care Department that was formed before the constitutional amendment in 2019, to the Home Visiting and Pre-K Accountability Act. So there's a lot of work, right, over the years, even before this 10-year constitutional amendment ballot initiative campaign was waged. A lot of history of building a strong presence of early childhood focus in New Mexico.
Thank you, Adrian. You know, New Mexico is the first state in the country to guarantee a constitutional right to every child to access quality early childhood education, and that's a big win for our state, and also I think it sets an example for other communities to follow as well. Particularly with what you mentioned, right? This was a people-driven movement. This was a child-driven movement. At the end of the day, I want to leave enough time for our audience to ask all of you some good hard questions. So I'm gonna close the panel with one more question to each of you, and I want you to please think small in terms of specificity, but also challenge us in the biggest of ways in your responses. And I'm going to start with Dr. Granillo. Dr. Granillo, what is your call to action to all of the people here today as we launch this Latino Infant Policy Initiative forward?
I have to just have one call to action. Gosh, there's so much that could be done here, but what I'm going to focus on right now is the need for more people to carry the torch and use their voice and their call whoever they need to, legislative representatives, whoever it is, to get the early childhood workforce more pay and more respect. This is right. If we get this right on this end, if we have the high quality, and we have a high quality force in place that represents the children and families being served, they deserve better pay and benefits. And when we have all of those things working in tandem, we can ensure that young children have access to high quality early childhood, that parents have access to support and the resources that they need. And if we get it done, get it right on this end, we don't need all those other services on the other end. And so as Latin, as wide as we can share the need for more funding to be able to support the early childhood ecosystem, we need to make sure that we do that, and particularly in the Latino community, as Tanya had mentioned, you know, Latinas are a very, very significant portion of this workforce, and they are significantly underpaid, even and in the workforce in general, but also in comparison to their non-Latino counterparts within early childhood education ecosystem. So, you know, that is a huge piece, and we cannot forget, when we talk about this early childhood ecosystem, we cannot forget about our family childcare providers. These are the somebody had mentioned in the chat, what is the family, friends, and neighbors? These are the folks that have turned their homes, their garages into quality centers where they're providing care for young children in their neighborhood so that parents can drop their children off and walk to the bus stop and go to work and not have to worry. Latino families were 22 times more likely to utilize this care. They are a critical component of this workforce, and we cannot forget about them when we're moving forward and trying to get better pay, better access to resources, ultimately all in an effort to ensure that our children and families have access to highest quality care, and that we have a robust, holistic system that is being supported so that not just our children and families can thrive, but that our workforce can also thrive in the chosen profession that they have decided to join.
Thank you. That's a great call to action, and a very important one as we seek to expand and grow this system. Without the workers, the system will not exist. Adrian, let's go to you. What is your call to action?
There's a role for everyone in this movement, and the example I talked about in New Mexico and what I see happening nationally is that we all add value, right, to this collective movement, and this is no different. This Latino Infant Initiative, we are in no way saying that we are leading right efforts. We are a part and want to add value to efforts, and we have we believe that when we elevate the needs, hopes, and dreams of families, that we get better, more informed efforts. So, whether you're a pediatrician or an advocate, a parent leader, a business owner, right, a nonprofit leader, find an ally, find a coalition, find a local effort to be a part of, to lend your voice, to talk about the importance of really bold investments into this work. And as Teresa said, it's not just the bold investments, but how do we shape and ensure that those investments are truly meeting the needs of the diversity of this country. And that's the language, the linguistic and cultural needs, and to ensure that the system we're building is representative of those needs. And we all have a place to continue, beating that drum and ensuring that that voice is center as we build out the system.
Thank you, Adrian. Melanie, you're in the mix. You're on the front lines of a lot of this work. What is your call to action for our attendees here today?
I would say that if you are working in an early childhood environment, to make sure and have parent advisory groups, if you don't already have them. And I would encourage parents, if your child is attending a school that doesn't have one, to start one up. And just encourage parents to be involved in their children's education, volunteer, stay involved, talk with their teachers and communicate, and let them see how interested you are in what they're doing. And I think that will foster a love of learning for your kids as well. And I think those things are really important. Parents do have a lot to add, and maybe some parents that aren't comfortable, maybe challenge them to get out of their comfort zone and seek out some opportunities for their kids as well.
100%, Melanie. I think that engagement from families is critical, especially for young children, for them to see that their mom, their dad, their parent, their caregiver is an active participant in our process, in our political process, right? And capital P political process. That means everything we do, everything we talk about at the kitchen table, everything we talk about at the community center, You know, the discussions we have as parents is we're dropping off our kid at childcare, and either criticizing the government or praising the government for whatever they did or failed to do that day. That is an incredible skill set and one that carries with us for the rest of our lives. Tanya, thank you for dropping the link to the policy agenda in the chat. Folks, you can find it in the chat. There's the full policy agenda as well as a one-pager that you can click on and download and help disseminate with your communities. For all of those in attendance, please, you can use the chat to drop any questions that you might have for any of our three panelists or for any of the presenters today. Or if you raise your hand, I will try my best to identify you in the sea of people and try to call on you to ask your question. So we have some time for a few questions. All right, I am not seeing any unless I am missing some. Okay, well, thank you, Melanie. Thank you, Dr. Granillo. Thank you, Adrian, for participating in this panel. It is always a pleasure to hear from you. Dr. Granillo, best of luck and blessings to you these next couple of days. Very excited for you and can't wait to meet baby Granillo on the next Zoom. Maybe he or she will be somewhere around the Zoom screen. Always great to see kids and pets, for those of you with pets at home. Adrian, I see that you have dropped the link to the National Family Survey as well. That's another very good resource for any one of you who wants to download it and help disseminate it. And if it's useful for your work, please use it. Tanya or Bob, anything else from you all before we close out?
I'll just reiterate Dr. Granillo's point about the need to radically revise the way we compensate the early childhood workforce. So we've been talking about developmental science for decades, but we haven't really seen the real impact on the policies in the field. So if we look at how much development is going on, how much language development, learning, memory, information processing, that prenatal infant that Teresa's carrying has already been starting on a journey of dual language development, learning, information processing. He or she, I don't have that information, but has been listening into Teresa's voice and processing the rhythmic patterns of the languages that Teresa speaks. So when Teresa speaks Spanish, when Teresa speaks English, baby Granillo is processing that language and noticing the differences between Spanish and English. So when baby Granillo is born, she's already started a multilingual developmental journey, which I'm sure her parents will support mightily. But we need to recognize the importance of early development and bring that into our policies, particularly in terms of how we compensate the workforce. So if we look at how important early learning is, and if we look at how demanding the early childhood positions are, the need to increase compensation is just overwhelming.
Thank you, Bob. Great point. We do have a couple of questions before we shut down here. And I'll read it out loud, and then whoever wants to jump in, please do. How can we elevate the need for elevating oral health for Latinx infants to prevent disease? How can this be linked to other services like family visits and education in the early childhood environments? Great question by Dr. Sue Keller.
I can talk a little bit about that in programmatically, right? What we do, and it's part of at Avance, we do operate Head Start, Early Head Start, but even in our parent-child education program. It is oral health is a very high focus where we not only teach our littles by going to the bathroom and doing, the brushing, but we teach our parents how to do that with their children and the importance of oral hygiene. And then we also bring in community partners, dentists, so that our community is not out there trying to find the next dentist that can meet their needs or is close to their, home or in their neighborhood or community, but rather we're bringing those resources to our families to say, here, talk to the dentist right here, and they're going to do a demonstration. But it is very critical, and it's important that it is embedded in all of these early childhood programs that we have, not just doing the practice with the children and teaching them, but teaching their families and their parents how to do that at home, and the importance of it at home.
Great, thank you for that response. Anyone else want to chime in? I see applause from Dr. Sue Keller. Okay, good answer, Dr. Granillo. All right, well, I think we'll be able to let you all go off a little early. Thank you so much. Big props as well to Tanya Villarroel for the heavy lift of getting this policy agenda together. If you can imagine different groups and different people working on this thing, she was able to herd all of us like the cats that we are and make it happen. So big props to Tanya for this incredible document. Tanya, I'll give you the last word.
Thank you, Javier. The truth is that I work with amazing people and we all worked as a team, and it was a really nice and great experience for me to work on this. I saw one question in the chat that says, what are the next steps for the Latino Infant Initiative? And I think that's a very interesting question. So as I mentioned, we worked really hard in drafting these goals because we need goals. We need to know where we're going to actually have a strategy to get there. So now what we're going to do is to implement this policy agenda. We know where we want to get. Now we have to talk and to work on how are we going to get there. And for that, it's very important to identify those opportunities, not only at the federal level, but also the state level. And that's why the experiences that you all shared here are so important. What Adrian mentioned about New Mexico, how can we replicate that? How can we make that happen in other states? And also to know that the work is much easier if we do it all together. We need partners, we need coalitions. So we're also looking for people that are working on the same goals and to share how they are doing it and to see how we can collaborate, because when we work together, we can go much farther. And lastly, also, it's super important to keep having the inputs of parents, of programs, and of all the people that work on the field to know that it's not only about what advocates think, but we always have to have in mind what our parents are actually experiencing and to have their input in every step of the way. So what are we doing next? We're implementing. We're looking for those opportunities to try to achieve those changes that we know that we need. And with that, thank you so much, everybody. It was really great to be able to talk with you all, and hope to see you soon and to connect. Thank you so much.